What if I told you that GPT-5, the most advanced AI yet, still lies to you almost half the time? That's not a warning. It's what independent testing actually shows. And here's the kicker. Those lies don't sound like lies. They sound polished, professional, and completely believable. Imagine asking a question and getting an answer that feels airtight, but is completely wrong. That's the hidden danger of today's AI. OpenAI proudly announced that GPT-5 has 46% fewer hallucinations compared to GPT-4. On paper, that sounds like a massive leap forward, almost half the mistakes, right? But here's what they didn't emphasize. A study from NewsGuard found that GPT models still spread falsehoods around 40% of the time. That's almost a coin flip between truth and fiction. So yes, GPT-5 improved, but it didn't fix the problem. And calling it progress without putting those numbers into context? That feels a lot like marketing spin rather than full transparency, and that's just the beginning. Because while the AI itself struggles with accuracy, the hype machine around it sometimes paints an even rosier picture than reality. So let's really break this down in detail. When people hear that AI lies, the first thought is usually that it is sneaky, manipulative, or doing it on purpose. But that is not what is really happening here. GPT-5 does not lie the way humans do. What it does is something called hallucination. Instead of admitting that it does not know the answer, it simply makes something up that sounds convincing. This happens because of how the model was trained in the first place. During training, silence was treated as a failure. If the model stayed quiet, it lost points. If it guessed, even if the guess was completely wrong, it still had a chance to win. Over time, the system learned one lesson very clearly: always answer, never stay quiet. That is why GPT-5 produces responses that sound so confident even when they are false. Here is where things get worrying. GPT-5 delivers false information with the same energy and tone as solid fact. It doesn't stop to signal uncertainty or add a warning. Imagine a student in class who is graded not for being right, but for sounding convincing. That student could confidently deliver nonsense and still pass. This is essentially what GPT-5 is doing when it hallucinates. OpenAI is aware of the hallucination problem and has tried to fix it. They proudly announced that GPT-5 has 46% fewer hallucinations than GPT-4. On the surface, that sounds incredible, but numbers without context can be misleading. For example, in one independent test, GPT-4 spread false claims in 98 out of 100 misinformation prompts, while GPT-5 still did so in about 60 out of 100. That is an improvement, yes, but it still means the system gave wrong answers more than half the time. The misleading part is not the statistic itself, but the way it is framed. The marketing makes it sound as if the problem is nearly solved, when in reality, it remains a very serious issue. That is why independent testing is so important. NewsGuard, a well-known group that tracks misinformation, conducted its own study on GPT models. Their findings showed that GPT was still spreading falsehoods about 4 times out of 10. 4 in 10 is not a small margin. Think of it like this. Would you continue trusting a GPS that led you to the wrong place 40% of the time, or a doctor who misdiagnosed you in 4 out of 10 visits? Most people would lose trust very quickly. Ever since the announcement of GPT-5, there's been a storm of claims that it's AGI, that it will replace humans in many jobs, and that it reasons flawlessly. And they make sense. The idea of a machine that is all-knowing, always correct, is exciting, even a little scary. But OpenAI has pushed back. Sam Altman, the CEO, has made it clear that GPT-5 is not AGI. It hasn't crossed that line yet. AGI means Artificial General Intelligence, an AI that can do almost any intellectual task a human can, adapt constantly, learn from every new situation. GPT-5 is smarter than many previous models, but it misses many of these AGI traits. For example, Altman has pointed out that GPT-5 can't continuously learn on its own from new information during deployment. Once trained, it still depends on updates from developers. It doesn't autonomously absorb new knowledge as people interact with it. Also, while GPT-5 is much better at tasks like coding, creative writing, and factual accuracy, it still hallucinates and has limitations with long-term reasoning or strategic planning, so the reality is more nuanced than the hype. Yes, GPT-5 is a major step forward. It's more useful, more powerful, and better in many ways than GPT-4 or earlier versions. OpenAI reports improvements in instruction following, reducing the tendency to flatter or agree too much, and handling real-world queries more effectively. But it's not perfect. It doesn't fully replace human expertise or human reasoning. It doesn't yet think independently, nor does it continuously self-improve without human oversight. So, the hype painted GPT-5 as the final leap into AGI land. The reality is that we made serious progress, but the finish line is still a distance away. And understanding that gap is a key, not to disappoint, but to stay grounded in what AI like GPT-5 can actually do, and what we still need to build for what comes next. GPT-5 doesn't lie because it's evil. It lies because it was trained to prioritize giving answers, even if they aren't always right. OpenAI hasn't lied outright either, but by only highlighting relative gains, like fewer hallucinations and better reasoning, they sometimes paint a picture that feels bigger than it really is. Yes, GPT-5 is smarter, more useful, and more accurate than its predecessors, but it still hallucinates, it still makes mistakes, and it's still far from AGI. But let's pause for a moment. If the problem is so clear, AI hallucinations, hype-driven claims, misleading promises, then what is the solution? Is this just something we have to live with? Or can it actually be fixed? This is where things get interesting, because while the problem feels huge, there are practical ways forward that could dramatically reduce these AI lies. The first fix is all about incentives. Right now, GPT models are rewarded for giving answers, not for being right. Imagine flipping that system. What if the model lost points for being confidently wrong and earned points for saying, "I don't know"? That shift alone would reshape how these systems respond. Instead of being trained to bluff their way through, they would be trained to pause when uncertain. The second fix is transparency. When OpenAI says GPT-5 has 46% fewer hallucinations, that's only part of the story. What people really need to know is the baseline, how often it still makes mistakes in real life. Companies should share both the percentage improvement and the actual error rate. Without that, the progress can sound better than it really is. It's like a car company saying their new model crashes 30% less than the old one, but not telling you it still crashes 4 out of 10 times. Being open builds trust and sets honest expectations. The last fix is education. We as users need to treat AI for what it really is, an assistant, not a truth machine. That means double-checking answers, cross-referencing with trusted sources, and remembering that even a confident response can still be completely wrong. If people approach AI with that mindset, the impact of hallucinations shrinks dramatically. GPT-5 is progress, not perfection. It's a powerful tool, but not the final leap into human-like intelligence. And understanding that difference is key to knowing where we really stand in the future of AI. Because the future isn't doomed. Fixing the training incentives, being transparent about numbers, educating users, and demanding honesty are the changes that can shift AI from being a confident bluffer into a more trustworthy partner. It won't be perfect. No system ever is, but it can be better, much better. So the next time you hear about fewer lies from AI, ask yourself, what's being said and what's being left unsaid? Because the truth is usually hiding in that gap. And if we can close that gap between promise and reality, between hype and honesty, then maybe GPT-5 and everything that comes after it really can change the world for the better. Not by pretending to be perfect, but by finally learning how to tell the truth. Do you ever trust AI enough to make big decisions? Or do you think it will always need human double-checking? Drop your comments below. Make sure to subscribe for more such content. Meet you in the next video. Thanks for watching.